Okay, good. While we are setting this up, I think that we can make a start with with the webinar. I would like to welcome all of the people who have logged on time. What we will do today is tell you a bit about where we are with the Asian Transport Outlook, which is a process which started about I think a year and a half ago now. But before we start with the actual presentation of the Asian Transport Outlook, we would like to give the floor to Pam Chang of the Asian Development Bank. Pam is part of the Transport Sector Group, which is a small group in the Asian Development Bank, in the Regional and Sustainable Development Department, and the Transport Sector Group is supporting the wider transport community in the Asian Development Bank in the delivery of transport assistance. And as you can see, the Asian Transport Outlook is an initiative of the Asian Development Bank. So Pam, would you like to share a few words on why the Asian Development Bank is supporting and has initiated the Asian Transport Outlook?
Yes.
The floor is yours. Or then maybe before Pam, it might be good if other people can actually mute their microphones. And then we will try to give opportunity for questions. So please, if you do have questions, put them in the chat window. The chat window you can see at the bottom right of your screen next to the participants. And then we'll probably answer a few questions somewhere in the middle of the webinar, and then we will do some more questions towards the end. And on behalf of Pam, I would like to excuse her already, because Pam, in about 57 minutes, will have to go to another meeting. So if you do have questions for Pam, we will try to make certain that we can answer those questions before she needs to leave. Yeah. Okay, Pam, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Cornie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. On behalf of the ADB, I would like to thank you all for participating in this webinar, to join us on this journey to create and share transport data and information to allow collective understanding of transport across Asia and the Pacific. So a key objective of this Asian Transport Outlook, the ATO as we call it, is to enable informed decisions to be based on the most up-to-date information. So primarily, we started this to promote an evidence-based approach in ADB's policy dialogue with our client governments. And the ATO enables measuring and monitoring to show how our transport projects are contributing to enabling countries in achieving their commitments towards international agreements. So the ATO covers a wide range of data, including country profiles, for example, GHG emissions and policies, which include, say, for example, transport plans and national policies. And there are more than 400 transport-related indicators covering more than 50 economies. So the data is collected from secondary as well as primary sources, and all are open access for you to use. So the ATO can be used in many ways. Within ADB, I can share that ATO can be used for example, discussions at a regional level, country level, project or programmatic level to support policy dialogue with our client governments to realize development of more sustainable transport future, and as well as to promote mobility for all. And we are working with other interested parties in developing the ATO as an instrument to track the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and other relevant international agreements on sustainable development in the transport sector. In another example, we're working very closely with our development partner, the UNCRD, on the use of ATO in monitoring and measuring the Aichi 2030 Declaration on Environmentally Sustainable Transport. So today we're very delighted to hold this session with our partners and with UNCRD. And it has been a wonderful collaboration to develop and initiate the ATO concept. So we intend to continue supporting the ATO through a possible phase 3 and 4, taking ATO up to 2025. So on this note, I look forward to our interesting lineup of presentations and discussions. And in case you are interested to work with us on the ATO, we would love to hear from you. And please get in touch with our ATO team. Thank you. I hand you back over to Cornie.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. And just for the record, we are also recording the webinar, and this will be posted later in the ATO YouTube channel, where you can also find other videos on the ATO. Yeah. So with that, I would like to start with the presentation. And next, Adweet. In the presentation, we will cover 4 parts today. We will talk a little bit about why do we have an ATO, and I think that Pam has already given a good overview of that. The second part, we will talk about what we have done since November 2020 in the ATO. In the third part of the webinar, we will talk about what is happening in phase 2 of the ATO, which is from November 21 till September 2022. And in the last part, in part 4, we will share some of the thoughts on how do you make the ATO sustainable, because that's obviously a key issue. Next. Next. I think like this slide in a way talks about and explains the scope of the Asian Transport Outlook. What you see here in the inner circle is 4 boxes which say transport infrastructure, transport activity, access and connectivity, and transport services. This more or less defines the transport sector by itself. Then in the box around it, you see a number of impacts like climate change, road safety, noise pollution, and air pollution. And in the outer ring, you see socioeconomic context. And it's actually the interplay between all of these 3 rings which defines the scope of the ATO. If we want to have an integrated transport policy, we need to have a comprehensive transport knowledge base. In the last part of the presentation, I will be talking a bit more about the sustainability and about the current landscape of organizations collecting transport-related information. Our view in the ATO is that we are not singling out, for example, climate change or road safety, but what we are trying to do is to really present a comprehensive overview of the transport sector. Yeah, next. I think that Pam mentioned that we are talking increasingly also in Asia about the importance of Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement in terms of guiding development, including in the transport sector. And at the moment, we see that there are only partial mechanisms in place for the regional tracking of the SDGs, road safety agreements, or other agreements like the National Urban Agenda of Habitat, as well, obviously, the Paris Agreement on climate change. What is important is that if we want to track these global agreements, we need to look at the data. So in other words, we need to see what's actually happening in the transport sector. But it's equally important to also have an overview of what policies are being put in place, because by looking at the current day policies, we can say something about the data of tomorrow. Yeah. So SDGs, Paris Agreement is an important driver of the ATO. Next. Then, obviously, it is important as well that the ADB, being the initiator and the host of the Asian Transport Outlook, it's key that that ADB has access to good information on transport as well. ADB typically does about $4.5 to $5 billion of transport assistance per year, and they do that through about 24 to 26 projects per year. What we see in the Asian Development Bank is that the nature of their transport assistance is changing. In the past, they would do typical projects like support a highway section of about 100 kilometers, or they would do 400 kilometers of rural roads. But what we are seeing as a part of the alignment process with the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, that there is a shift towards larger types of projects. And these are sometimes policy-based, sometimes these are sector-based. But in order to do these kinds of new types of projects, you need to have a different type of information. And what applies to ADB obviously also applies to other multilateral and bilateral donors. In addition to the SDGs and in addition to, let's say, the donors, it's obviously also the countries in the region which need to have access to good information as well. So that's another possible client for the ATO as well. Next. At the moment, what we see in terms of the collection of information on transport knowledge, on transport data and transport policy in Asia and the Pacific, we see that we have a fragmented landscape where there are different organizations who are covering different types of topics, but there is also quite a lot which does not get covered. We see that there is a fair amount of overlap. We see that multiple organizations cover similar topics, and in several cases, they present the same information based on the same primary data. And what we see is that geographically incomplete, that in several initiatives, there is a focus on major economies or a sub-regional approach. But if we look at it, transport policy making in Asia and the Pacific is very much done on a national level or on a subnational level. And in Europe, we see that transport policy is partly done on the basis of the EU, but we have not reached that stage yet in Asia. So, and this is also why it's important to really, so we will have information on Niue, which is a country in the Pacific with 1,450 inhabitants. And we also have information on China, which has 1.4 billion. So both are equally important. Yeah, next. So what is it that we are trying to do with the ATO? A comprehensive knowledge base that on transport in Asia and the Pacific that serves all stakeholders working on transport in Asia and the Pacific. Then turn an initially ADB-led temporary initiative into a more permanent initiative that has the support from multiple stakeholders. And this is what Pam was referring to, is that ADB support has committed support up to 2025, but it's important that the knowledge is also available after 2025. And ultimately, the aim is, of course, transport policy and investments in Asia and the Pacific, which are increasingly data-driven. So that's the direction that we need to move towards. Next. Yeah, so very briefly on the history of the ATO, we started in 2019 to think about the ATO. And then in November of 2020, we formally started phase 1. Then there was a brief interim phase from May to October of last year, and currently we are in the middle of, or let's say at the beginning of phase 2. Briefly, who is the ATO? The ATO currently consists of a team of 5 persons. Apart from myself, that's Sudhir Gota, who is based in India. And Sudhir, I think several of you might know Sudhir, who has been working on transport data for a long time. In addition to that, we have 3 researchers in the ATO team. So that's Adwait Limay in India. That's Mel Eden in the Philippines, and we have Urwa Khan from Pakistan, but who is based in Japan. And this is also what we are trying to do, is also to create the next generation of data specialists. So there is a strong capacity building element to the HO as well. Next. Pam mentioned 450 indicators. At the moment, on this slide, if you include the policy indicators, we actually have 532 indicators. But you also see at the bottom right of this slide that we only have complete information for 221 indicators, and we have partial information for 111 indicators. And we are actually in the process of cleaning up our indicator list, and the list might actually go down a bit from 532 to a lower number of indicators. But what is important in line with the slide that I showed at the beginning is that we have information in currently 9 categories: infrastructure, activity and services, access and connectivity, safety, air pollution, climate change, socioeconomic, and then we have a number of miscellaneous indicators. And then we have a whole set of policy indicators as well. You can see here that on the left, we start in Iran in the west, and we go all the way east to Japan. We start in Russia in the north, and we go all the way south to the Pacific Islands. Yeah, next. So how does it actually work? So how can you access this information? And you see at the bottom of the screen, you see a web link, dataadb.org. This is where you can actually access all the data. And if you can click the start, Adwait, then we will show you in a short video how you can actually use the data. Yeah.
The ATO shareable database is available at the ADB Data Library. The data page contains various information such as the ATO user guide, the ATO master list of indicators, and the shareable database workbooks arranged by topic. An upcoming policy workbook will also be available in the future. The shareable database includes data on transport infrastructure, transport activity and services, access and connectivity, road safety, air pollution, climate change, socioeconomic indicators, and other transport-related information. These can be downloaded locally as Excel files. To do this, click on the workbook title in the data page. The workbooks are provided with a table of contents with a list of indicators for the topic. Available indicators are hyperlinked for easier navigation. To go to a specific indicator, click on the indicator code. To go back to the table of contents, click on the Back to TOC button. Some indicators like total road length come from multiple sources such as secondary data and also country statistics. The country-wise data can be filtered by country typologies such as sub-regional groupings and income levels.
Yeah. Thank you, Adwait, and thank you, Mel, for narrating the video.
ATO shareable database is...
Yeah, I think that we have heard it, Adwait. That I think I wanted to pick up in one of the things that what was mentioned in the video is that information comes from different sources, and this is something that we will be highlighting a few more times, because we have discovered that in a certain way there are different truths out there, like information. If you look at different sources have often different information for the same indicator. We are not saying which information is right or wrong, and what we are doing is that we are reporting all of the different sources if they are available. So apart from this national level database, recently we have also launched a urban database. The urban database has 460 urban centers. 412 of those are in the Asia and the Pacific. And we also, to be able to compare Asia with the rest of the world, we also included 48 international cities. These have the same types of indicators that we also have in the national level database, but in addition to that, we also have 11 indicators on urban form, structure, and land use, which is quite important when you talk about urban transport. Yeah, next. Then I think that reference was made to the policy database, the policy workbook. This is actually something that we're quite proud of, because we have seen other people and other groups who have fairly extensive data sets, but in terms of policy, we see that less effort has been made. So in terms of the work that we're doing on policy, for all 51 economies, we have a country profile. This country profile is an internal document in the ATO, and this is more or less a write-up of about 20 to 25 pages, and which has all the information for that country, the policy information. These are internal documents, but we have, on a number of occasions, we have shared country profiles with people working on a specific country. So if you are interested in these country profiles, do not hesitate and send us an email, and we will be happy to share those with you. In addition to that, we're currently on the basis of about 480 transport-related policy documents. We have come up with an overview of about 682 targets in the transport sector in the ATO countries. And we have organized all of these targets according to 11 different indicators. Then the policy documents itself, if you are working on transport in Asia and you're interested in going to the original documents, all 480 documents are actually available on the ADB website as well, or at least links are available there. And we have organized those in a separate document where we have also annotated them, so that if you're interested in road safety or if you're interested in Bangladesh, you can very easily find the policy documents for either road safety or for Bangladesh. Yeah, next. In terms of analysis, our hope is that the wider transport community will actually use the ATO data to do their own analysis. This is also why we make all of the documents available to the entire community. But obviously, we're also interested in our data ourselves as well. And so we have been doing some analysis ourselves as well. In the first phase of the ATO, we actually came up with 20 storylines, which are, let's say, 4 or 5 page documents around a certain theme, illustrated with data. These are published at the website of the SLOCAT Partnership, and you see the link here on the screen. Then, in terms of the work on climate change, in preparation of the COP, we wrote a paper, A New Perspective on Transport and Climate Change, in which we looked at the data, and then we say, like, is it still the case that transport is a very difficult sector to decarbonize, or is this something which is increasingly becoming likely? And if you're interested in the conclusion, go to this paper, which I mentioned here. The link is indicated. And by the way, we will be sharing the presentation after the webinar, so you will be able to see all of these links. Then obviously, COVID is still an important problem also in Asia and the Pacific. At the beginning of the ATO, we did a fairly extensive analysis of the impact of transport on COVID, and that was incorporated in a document where Pam was the lead author, which is COVID-19 and Transport in Asia and the Pacific. Just recently, we also published the first report on what is the status of transport-related SDG targets in the Asia and Pacific region. Then earlier this week, we published a paper based on our urban transport database, which talks about the relationship between density and in Asian cities and transport-related CO2 emissions. And in support of the IG 2030 declaration, we also developed a baseline report, and Mohanty will be talking about that a bit later. Yeah, but these are examples of the type of analysis at the regional level that you can do. Obviously, there's quite a lot of sub-regional or thematic analysis that could be done as well on the basis of the data and the policy information included in the ATO. Yeah, next. So obviously it is important that the client, in this case the Asian Development Bank, that ADB is happy with the way that the Asian transport outlook is evolving. One quote from Mr. Bambang Susantono, the Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development, the ADB, which we thought was quite it was quite good for the ATO, because what Bambang said is that we are now getting the data that details the shortages in transport infrastructure and transport services experienced by the ADB members. So, and this really goes back to data-driven transport policies, data-driven transport investments. Yeah, so now we would like to give you a brief overview of the kind of information that we have in the ATO. Next. So there are a number of sample charts. This is a spider chart in which we have plotted the ATO share on a large number of indicators versus global. So basically, what is important is that the GDP share in Asia is around 30%. The population, on the other hand, in Asia is 58%. And if you can go to the one tweet which shows the access of rural and the access of urban, sorry. You're going too fast. No. Go back to the spider chart. Yeah. So that, yeah. So you see that the key message of this is that if we look at the population of Asia, which is 58% of global total, and if we look at rural, and if we look at urban and freight travel, that we see that this is only 36 or 27%. So that means there is a large part of unsatisfied travel demand in Asia. So that if Asia would have travel activity which is proportionate to its share of the population, we will see a large increase in Asia. Yeah, next. This is, I think, one of the slides which we often show to illustrate the difference and the importance of looking at different sources of information. This is a chart which talks about the road infrastructure in Asia, and we have on the left we have sources which report traditional survey methods for measuring road length in Asia, and on the right side we look at smart data from OpenStreetMap and a number of other sources, and you see, depending on the source that you look at, you would get an entirely different number with respect to road length in Asia, and you can differentiate this obviously by income category. You can differentiate this by sub-region in Asia, and you can differentiate this by income levels. So all of these, you're able to see that. In this case, on the right side, you see the ATO estimate. In this case, we have made an effort and to come up with, let's say, which we think is the most representative number, and we see like that this actually is compared to the others that we have gone with the higher source and not with the lower source. If we have time later in the webinar, we are happy to discuss that, why we have made these choices. Yeah, next. This is a chart which talks about road versus rail in Asia. We see that in both cases that there is an increase in road construction and in rail construction. But what is happening in Asia is that road construction is happening at a much faster pace than rail construction. So, and the challenge that's coming up then, and this is also from the perspective of sustainability, is that we see that modal share for freight is actually shifting away from roads, from rail towards roads, which from a sustainability perspective is not something that we would like to see. Yeah, next. Then in terms of urban, I think that for those of you in the audience who have been working on urban transport for a number of years are quite familiar with the chart on the left from Peter Newman and Ken Worthy, which talks about transport, energy, and population density, which shows a very nice curve. I think that this data, or let's say this graph, was based on the Millennium data set, which is actually a data set which was developed by UITP, the International Association on Public Transport, around the year 2000. So we were interested in that. We say, like, is that still a valid chart? And on the right, you see the information that we have plotted on the basis of more recent information, and you see that the basic shape of the chart is still there, and that the relationship between density and transport-related CO2 emissions can still be made. Yeah. Next. Then on the policies, one of the key things is that we often talk about transport policy, but in reality, we saw that only 61% of the ATO economies have a formal comprehensive transport policy. And what we mean by that is a transport policy which integrates the development of the transport infrastructure, the services, but which also considers topics like climate change, road safety, and things like that. And we see that a smaller number of countries have logistics policies or have road policies or automotive policies. And then in terms of the colors, what is important as well is that out of the 61% of the economies in Asia that have a transport policy, we see that 17 of those countries have adopted their policy before 2016. And why is 2016 important? Because 2016, we say, is the year that the SDGs and the Paris Agreement came into force. What we see that 14 countries have adopted a policy after 2016, and let's say 20 countries do not have a formal policy. So it means that more than half of the Asian countries do not have a transport policy that actually incorporates the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. So if we say that, so this is something, because ultimately policy drives investments and policy drives behavior. So what we are trying to do in our outreach is also to encourage the countries to actually update their policies. And this is also something which we are working on together with UNCRD as well. And I think that maybe Mohanty can say something about that later. Yeah, next. Then in terms of what kind of, I talked about the 682 targets. So what we are looking at, what kind of targets do countries have on road expansion? What kind of targets do they have on the maintenance of their roads? What are the rail-based targets? What are the ICT-based targets, the safety-based targets, the air pollution-related targets, climate change-related targets? What targets do countries have on zero-emission vehicles, and what targets do they have on modal share? And so you can see here, what the distribution is. 100% of the countries in the ATO have climate change related targets, but we see that at least based on our information so far, only 39% of the countries have targets related to modal share or to shifts in modal share. Yeah. Next. With that, yeah. So I think I would like to give the floor to Mohanty now, so that he can speak about the regional EST forum and the Aichi declaration. Mohanty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cornie. Thank you very much, dear participants. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. First of all, on behalf of UNCRD, UN DESA, UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs, please allow me to express our deep appreciation to ADB and the ATO team for organizing this webinar, which is very important for us. I think all of us know that the success of various global agreements such as SDG and the Paris Agreement, the new urban agenda, and also the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, what Cornie was just mentioning before, largely depends on the performance in Asia, in particular, the transport sector, how we can actually transform the transport sector of Asia so that all the objectives of these global agreements are integrated in the transport sector development of Asia. Asia's transport sector is also substantial to deliver on such international agreements and will always be essential to society. And as such, it will need to keep a pace with the demands of the growing community while decarbonizing the transport sector at the same time. In this regard, the last EST forum, the 14th high-level intergovernmental regional EST forum in Asia, which was co-organized by UNCRD, UN DESA, the Ministry of the Environment, Government of Japan, and UNESCAP and Asian Development Bank on 18th to 20th of October last year, agreed and adopted the 2030 Aichi Declaration on environmentally sustainable transport, making transport in Asia sustainable with an aim to catalyze transformational change in the transport sector. Actually, it covers both the passenger and the freight transport, and it also balancedly covered both the rural and the urban transport with an objective to achieve universally accessible, safe, affordable, efficient, resilient, clean and low carbon transport in Asia. Aligned with the objective of achieving the SDGs and the Paris Agreement on climate change, among others, the Aichi 2030 Declaration has 6 dedicated goals that aims to place in Asia in the forefront of new collaborative approaches to bring transformational change in the transport sector of Asia. And these goals are around environmental sustainability, that is goal number 1, which has 3 sub-goals to achieve low carbon, enhance resilience, and also to minimize the air pollution in the transport sector. Goal 2 is around road safety. Goal 3, how to achieve economic sustainability. Goal 4, rural accessibility. Goal 5 is around urban accessibility. And last goal, goal number 6, is around national access and regional connectivity. So in this regard, this will include enabling changes to policy, institutional frameworks, financing models, data management approaches, and application of technology, and also the people and environmental friendly transport infrastructure development in transport sector of Asia that the Aichi Declaration calls for. The Aichi Declaration also aims to serve as a good catalyst towards improved global reporting on transport, climate, and sustainable development. The most important here, I would like to flag it here, is that it is also expected that the Aichi 2030 Declaration will catalyze a system of coordinated reporting mechanism by the countries and other stakeholders that will be developed to strengthen the integrated reporting on transport data and policies to support the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the SDGs, and also the Paris Agreement on climate change. So most importantly, the Aichi Declaration wants to address the synergies in various efforts with regard to achieving these international goals and agreements. The emerging partnership with the Asian Development Bank that what Pam was mentioning in the beginning is extremely important for us, specifically through this Asian Transport Outlook process, which aims to lay a foundation for the future country reporting on the Aichi 2030 Declaration. The new indicator framework that Cornie was mentioning, it includes around 532 dedicated indicators, would also allow the EST member countries as well as the regional stakeholders to monitor and track progress against the agreed 6 goals, while countries will continue to be able to share the good policy practices during the EST forum. Just to tell you a little bit about the forum, those who are not aware of, this is an intergovernmental policy forum and transport sector that was launched in 2005 and which uniquely brings a number of line ministries, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Urban Development under the same policy umbrella to discuss multi-sectoral transport and environment issues, including natural disasters and also the climate change issues and their linkage with regard to the transport sector. So finally, the transport, as all of us know, is that the circulation system for the world's communities and its people, and modes are its lifeblood. The global pandemic, what Cornie was mentioning before, has reminded us that the countries, the communities are dependent on transport networks, and that in order for the world's peoples to continue to thrive, they need to be connected to facilitate trade, cultural and knowledge exchanges. In this regard, we expect that the Aichi 2030 Declaration, with a symbiotic relationship with ATO, which provides the robust data, information, and indicator support that will be used to track the progress of implementation of the Aichi Declaration, it will provide a meaningful input in this way. So, Cornie, I think that is what I intended to say. And the end, I would like to once again express our deep appreciation to ADB to think of mobilizing support. Of course, it is not official, but there we expect that ADB will continue to support the EST process through its EST process in the next phase, so that we can derive meaningful synergies between the two processes. The one is the policy process involving the governments, and the data, the ATO process, which is a scientific process that also can marry with this policy process to achieve the sustainability in the transport sector of Asia. Thank you, Cornie.
Yeah, thank you, Mohanty. So and just to summarize that the ATO also in 2022 that we will do an update of the status report is to see like how countries are progressing in the implementation of the 6 goals that Mohanty mentioned. And what we will be doing is that we will be doing joint capacity building with UNCRD to strengthen country reporting in 2022 as well.
I missed that one. Thank you, Cornie.
Yeah. I mentioned that Pam has to leave at the hour. I was wondering whether so far we see no questions in chat, but I was wondering whether there are some people who have questions up to what we have been presenting up to now, or who have questions to ADB with respect to the support that ADB is giving for the ATO. So I think that we still have about 12 minutes that we can answer some of these questions. So I think if you would like to ask a question, you can also just unmute yourself and just ask the question, because I think that the group is not too large. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question either to Pam or a question about what has been presented up to now by me and Mohanty? I think that so far I see that there is nobody who is let's say, has raised their hand or put something in chat. With that, Adwit, then I propose that we continue with the presentation. So the next part of the presentation is to describe what we are doing in the current phase of the ATO. Yeah. So I think that the large number of indicators in the ATO has been mentioned a few times. So what we are planning to do in phase 2 is to clean, update, and expand the shareable national database and the shareable urban database. What do we mean when we talk about cleaning? Cleaning is that we think that initially we came up with a very long list of indicators, the 450 plus on transport. And we have now reached the stage that we say that we now have a better understanding for which indicators there is data available, and we have a better insight into the relevance of the indicators. So based on that, we probably will drop a fair number of indicators in the second phase. So we don't know exactly how many indicators we're going to end up with at the end of phase 2. It will still be a sizable number, but it will be less big than what we have now. Then under the heading update, Pam mentioned that the ATO is sourced from primary and secondary indicators, data sources. So when we talk about primary indicators, these are indicators which have been collected on the basis of statistical yearbooks, statistical websites of the 51 countries in the ATO. And what we will be doing in the coming months is to update this information. We did the first round of information collection a year ago, and we expect that countries will have updated and published new information. In order for the ATO to remain relevant, it is obviously important that we have the most recent information that is available. Then a fair amount of indicators actually come from secondary sources, and secondary sources can be the World Health Organization, or it can be an organization like ITDP. They are publishing information for certain indicators, and so we will also do a check whether those indicators can be updated as well. And the same applies obviously to the Sustainable Urban Database, where we will also update. Then, under the heading expanding, I mentioned the term transport investments a few times. Obviously, policy is one thing, but if you want to implement policy, you need to make investments in the transport sector. And so what we're trying to do is to see, can we capture what goes into the funding of the transport sector in Asia? We're looking here at, you could say, roughly 3 sources. We're looking at donor funding, and there we talk about multilateral, but also bilateral. And so one of the things that we have already seen is that China as a bilateral donor is becoming increasingly important in the funding of the transport sector in Asia. The second is that we are looking at private sector investment and public-private investments. And the third is obviously national funding of the transport sector. We are not yet certain. We are fairly confident for the first 2 categories on development aid to the transport sector and PPP investments in the transport sector. These ones are relatively well documented. We are now trying to get a handle on how to capture the information on national funding of the transport sector, which is slightly more difficult. Then, in terms of the urban database, I mentioned that we cover 460 cities. We have currently 80 indicators, but these are all from secondary sources. And what we want to do in phase 2 of the ATO is take a detailed look at 50 Asian cities, and there we would come up with additional indicators, and this would also be indicators which would be sourced from primary data from the cities. So that would give you a much better overview. Once you have a better overview, you're also able to say more about what is happening in those 50 cities and to see where do Asian cities move in terms of transport. Yeah. So this is with respect to the cleaning, the updating, and the expansion of the database. Then next slide. The next slide is the ATO web-based interface. At the moment, the data are published as Excel worksheets on the ADB website, and you can see the information at the bottom, and a lot of what we call data nerds are very happy that we actually make the Excel data sheets available. That because that allows them to do all kinds of analysis by themselves. But we have also received feedback that people say that if you have, let's say, 300 plus Excel worksheets, it is sometimes a bit difficult to find the information. So what we are working on now, or what we are starting work on, is a web-based interface, and which would then generate charts, sector overviews, or storylines, or country fact sheets, or custom dashboards. So this is what you can see on the right side of the slide. What we need to do is on the left side, it's quite a lot of work that needs to go into this before that this is available. But hopefully we will be able to have to launch this web-based interface for the Asian Transport Outlook, probably I would say around the summer of this year, and then further work would be done in the ATO phase 3 and phase 4. What we have done in preparing for that is look at all kinds of other organizations who also have these kinds of web-based interfaces. One example that we like, for example, is that if you go to the data side of the World Bank, that we think that this is quite a user-friendly way. We have looked at the International Energy Agency. We have looked at something like 7 or 8 other examples, and what we will do is that we will take our inspiration from those, and that we say, like, what works well there, that we will use that as well. But obviously, this is also something that we will be talking to the users of the ATO as well in the coming months to hear from them, that they say, like, what is it that they would like to see? Are you more interested in thematic charts and maps and tables, or are you more interested in country fact sheets? So, and then the last one, the custom dashboard. This is obviously the ultimate. Like if we are able to give control to the users so that they can decide themselves what kind of maps they would like to generate based on the ATO information. But this is something which probably will only come in phase 3. Yeah. Next. We mentioned transport investments a few times. A question that we received from several people within the Asian Development Bank is that they say, is it possible to have an overview of what it costs to expand and to maintain the transport sector? Because if they need to develop a new project, or if they need to develop a new program, it's helpful to have that information. So what we are looking at now initially is what is the cost of traditional transport infrastructure? So in other words, like based on analysis of previous projects, what did it cost to construct 1 kilometer of road in Bangladesh? Or like if we talk about road maintenance in Myanmar, do we know what the cost was in previous projects. We are doing the same for heavy rail. So what does it cost to construct railways? What does it cost to construct urban public transport infrastructure in terms of rail or BRT? So these are our initial efforts. Like within the team, we are having a discussion at the moment whether it's possible to include costs of cycling or walking infrastructure. So with all of these things, these costs are obviously very much dependent on the country. It depends on the year. It depends on the details. So it will never be possible to come up with a general number and say it costs so much to construct 1 kilometer of road. But what we can do is to give a large number of examples of previous projects so that you're actually able to track that information. And we hope that this would actually enable people working in the transport sector, both in the donor community as well as in the countries themselves, to get a better appreciation of what is involved if we talk about investments in the transport sector. This is something which we probably will be able to launch in about 2-3 months from now. But so and once we have, then we will broadcast this obviously also again on social media that we have this information. Yeah, next. Then the outlook component of the ATO. Up to now, the information included in the ATO is mostly historic data, and the word outlook also assumes that we are looking forward. So what we would like to do is that to come up with a 2030 baseline for assessing transport sector progress in Asia, and vis-a-vis the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the IG 2030 declaration, as well as the ADB Strategy 2030. So it's actually quite convenient for us that 2030 is such a milestone year. Obviously, the SDGs go to 2030. Like the Paris Agreement also often talks about 2050. So we are aware that 2050 is also a milestone year, but initially we will focus on the 2030 baseline, because it is very difficult to come up with a baseline and to prejudge what the transport sector would look like in 2050. So what we will be doing is that we will be collecting a large number of secondary individual country projections on transport activity, vehicle ownership, modal split, fuel share, greenhouse gas emissions, and we will collect those both from primary and from secondary sources. And the projections that we would be collecting would be based on individual country and regional forecasts that were done in the last in the last decade. Yeah. So once we have collected all of these individual country projections in these areas that we mentioned, what we will be doing is that based on the average transport demand from secondary forecast, we will develop 2030 sketch estimates for employment in the transport sector, for infrastructure, road safety, investments and access based on existing cause-effect relationships within Asia. And in a number of cases, we would also apply what-if scenarios based on what has been currently listed in the policies. So we will be making available these the information that I mentioned in bullet 2 and 3. But in addition to that, we will also be coming up with a report around that, which we will call the 2030 Asian Transport Outlook Report. This one will come towards the end of phase 3. Yeah, and work on this on the outlook component is that we are still figuring out exactly how we are going to do that. Again, like I assume that we will have some time for questions, and I'm certain that Sudhir can also share some more detail on that if you would like to have that. Yeah. Next. Yeah. So this is on the activities in phase 2. Then a couple of slides with respect to the sustainability of the ATO. In previous webinars, Sudhir and I were talking about previous data projects that we had been involved with. And if I look at the participants in this webinar, a number of people have been involved in transport data related projects. The challenge that we see is how can we reach a situation that the ATO is not seen as a project, but that the ATO is seen as a more permanent arrangement to access information on transport data and policy information in Asia and the Pacific. So in order to do that, we need to have strong support from at least one organization. And we are very happy that ADB understands the challenges involved. So ADB has already provided support for the development of the ATO concept and its initial development. ADB has been supporting phase 1, the interim phase, now phase 2. And as Pam indicated at the beginning, that ADB is also committed to support possible phase 3 and phase 4 of the ATO, which would mean that the Asian Development Bank would support the ATO process for a period of about 5 years. As I will mention in the next slides, we are looking also at partnerships with other organizations. So the ADB also obviously welcomes additional support for the ATO in phase 3 and 4 and beyond. But ADB remains committed. That I think is the main message. Next. So here, what we have done is, with the emphasis on indicative overview of organizations collecting transport information. So when we were advertising this webinar, we were posting this chart in Twitter. And so one of the feedbacks that we received from the International Road Federation is that they say, we do not just limit ourselves to collecting information on infrastructure, we also collect information on other topics as well. And I think that that's quite a fair point. But what you see is that there is quite a diverse landscape of organizations collecting information on transport, either in the form of data or in the form of policies. These ones you can divide into 2 categories. You have groups which are focused on one specific topic. For example, IRAP, which is focusing very much on road safety. You could say Clean Air Asia, which has a focus towards air quality. You have ITDP, which is focusing very strongly on urban transport. And you have other organizations which are more generic. So International Road Federation or International Transport Forum or the World Bank, which have actually information on quite a lot of topics. So the challenge is, but at the same time, what we said at the beginning of the presentation, the landscape is also fragmented. There is overlap. And let's say in some cases, there are parts which are not covered at all. So the question is, which we will be asking to all of the organizations in the coming months, is that do they see that there is an added value to have an umbrella initiative like the Asian Transport Outlook, which actually synthesizes all the information from these secondary sources and combines this with primary sources. That is the question that we will be asking. Next. So we want to think quite actively about sustainability already in phase 2. So that, and then we are talking about the situation beyond in 2025 and beyond. So because we know that this is a complex topic, and that we should start this early. So what we will be doing in phase 2 is that at the beginning of the ATO, we already did some mapping of the landscape of organizations collecting this information. So we will be updating this. Then we will have further bilateral discussions with all the thematic and the general transport knowledge managers or providers. We are working on a discussion document in which we are outlining the sustainability options and what could be the pathways leading to these sustainability options. We are in discussions with ITF. ITF indicated that they are still expecting an in-person meeting in Leipzig in May of this year. And so we will have a side event on the Asian Transport Outlook during ITF 2022. But in addition to that, we are also considering to organize a side meeting during ITF to which we would invite all the interested parties currently involved in collecting and organizing knowledge on transport in Asia. This meeting will be a hybrid meeting, so also those organizations who are not able to attend the meeting in Leipzig would still be able to take part in the meeting. And then so then do some brainstorming on possible enabling initial ATO governance structures to be introduced in phase 3 of the ATO. Because at the moment, you could say that the ATO governance is extremely simple. It is basically the ATO team and the Asian Development Bank. But we acknowledge that if we want to have a more sustained effort to the ATO, that we also need to involve the partners in the discussions on what the ATO would be doing. But I think that the sustainability part is what we are doing in phase 2 is the beginning, but we will not be able to find all the answers completely to this. Yeah, next. What we wanted to encourage you is that we came out with the first ATO newsletter, which we will use to share the outputs of the ATO also in the coming months in phase 2. So here you see a link where you can subscribe. If you allow us, we will add the people who are registered for the webinar. We will add them to the subscribers list, so you don't need to do anything yourself, but we will add you. Yeah, and then we are also posting on a regular basis updates on the ATO through the ADB Transport Twitter account. So that's the presentation from my side. So phase 2 of the ATO, to summarize, is we will be adding information to the ATO. We will work actively on how to make the information more readily and more easily accessible, and at the same time we will start the thinking on how can we ensure that this ATO project is not a one-time project, but that this becomes a more regular process. Yeah. With that, we still have about 20 minutes for questions and discussions. So please feel free to raise your hand or to unmute yourself and ask questions, or also if you have been using the ATO in your work, we would also be happy to hear from you what your experience has been in using it. So the floor is open.
Hi, Cornie. This is Bert Fabian.
I see that, Bert, that you are there. So I was also referring to you as a seasoned data professional, Bert.
Okay, that's good. We are now all seasoned. Well, first of all, congratulations. I think you're all doing a great job on this Asia Transport Outlook, and we're also able to use the information that you share. Of course, we cite you,
Yeah.
but my question is the involvement of universities, whether in terms of sustainability and I don't know, because I was just thinking while you were presenting the world in data, which is now become very popular, is linked to a university, and other initiatives on data, which is are also linked to universities. So maybe I don't know, exploring cooperation with some of these universities could also be considered as part of your sustainability strategy.
Yeah, and for other people's information, Bert is working with on transport in UNEP, based in Bangkok. Yeah, so I think that you could say in terms of sustainability, you could say that we need to make a number of decisions. So first, you could say currently we are in the Asian Development Bank. So is it desirable and is it feasible that the ATO would continue to be hosted by the Asian Development Bank? That's one pathway. Another pathway is that you say, like, if it's not in the ADB, it would be outside the ADB. Then you can say it can either be in a, let's say, in a private sector firm, or it could be in a not-for-profit entity. And like within the not-for-profit pathway, you could say that universities, a university or multiple universities focusing on transport, that could be an option. That is something that I've been thinking about as well. Yeah, like the thought has come up as a possibility. Yeah. And then, Bert, you mentioned that you have been using the ATO. Can you give an example of what you have been using the ATO for?
For example, one recent one that comes to mind is the Asia Pacific Climate Week, which was organized by the UNFCCC. It was in October in Asia, virtually organized, and then UNEP was asked to organize the transport track, as they call it. Other organizations like UNDP organized urban issues and other agencies as well. So, but if we use framing presentations or like to frame the discussions, usually, especially in my case, I would like to give an overview of what's happening in Asia. And then there you would need to have like aggregated information and new information. And this is where I think the Asia Transport Outlook comes in very handy. That
Yeah.
you can go to the website, you can get this, you have these graphs, and yeah, you can use it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other persons who have questions or suggestions to us?
Maybe. Hello.
Yes, Alvin.
Hi, Cornie. Hi, everyone. This is Alvin Mejia. I'm with the Bukopala Institute, and I would like to congratulate you and the team for the the efforts that you've done in terms of compiling all the data. Can only imagine the work that you have put into the ATO. And maybe just to expound on what Bert had said, yeah, there might be aside from the sustainability, let's say dimension of the ATO. In terms of the utilization, I think there's a lot of opportunities to explore with academic institutes, the universities, and maybe they can also bring contributions and probably later on in terms of looking into the other types of data, like when we look into like unstructured data, big data that's coming. I would imagine that this would really be helpful for the ATO, particularly more on the, let's say, the once the urban component grows and you have all these different, let's say, the geospatial data, and all the, I would imagine that you're also looking into the horizon in terms of maybe once the governance structures in terms of the data being open have been, let's say, formalized, that you can have specific data contributions from different entities, not just the academic entities, but maybe there would be some, let's say, private entities. Maybe I'm thinking about like shared mobility operators, these kinds of entities who might be able to contribute these sorts of data, which would include data which would normally also be like unstructured. And yeah, but it would be really great to see the ATO to evolve also to be more inclusive in that way. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that the topic of big data has come up from time to time. Yeah, so definitely something that we can look at. Yeah. Good. Any last questions? Yeah. So if there are no further.
Hello, Cornie. Can you hear me? This is Ganesh speaking from UNCRD Japan.
Yes, Ganesh. I can.
Yeah, I
hear
have
you.
one question to you. Of course, this is a very good initiative, and congratulations all the team. And we'll be happy all the time to collaborate with the ATO team. My question is that there are a lot of data you have collected from the different countries, and some countries, particularly least developing countries, have limited data sources. So, are you thinking to provide some capacity building or some kind of support through ATO that they can enhance their capacity to collect primary data or the secondary data and put on the kind of platform so that it is easier for all of ATO team and other like us who can use directly, and those data can be more verified, more can be reliable. Do you
Yeah.
have such kind of thinking of in the long term for the sustainability of the ATO?
I think that if you talk about the long-term sustainability of the ATO, that capacity building is definitely a priority. Like I mentioned that the joint capacity building, which we are planning in phase 2 together with UNCRD, to support the countries on reporting on the IG 2030 declaration. This was also proposed. This was also proposed with the idea that this could be a start of the capacity building as well. The challenge is that because of also Corona restrictions, that we are not able to travel, and we are not able to actually bring countries together. So my expectation would be that once we start these discussions with the countries on the country reporting, that it will be quite quickly clear that several countries would like to have this assistance in terms of data collection, data management, and things like that. The challenge is that you need to differentiate there between thematic. So, for example, data on road safety or data on climate change, or the general data collection on transport infrastructure. So this would also, you also would need to check on let's say, who is able to provide this capacity assistance. But ultimately, like it's clear that there will also be, I think, people who will suggest then that there is a need to harmonize definitions and things like that. So once we continue with the ATO process, in the medium and the long term, both this issue of definitions and capacity building, they will come up. I think this is also where a partnership approach is important, because ultimately a small team like the ATO cannot do all of these things by itself. Multiple organizations would need to be involved in that, but this is something, I think it's a topic which is relevant and which will come up, Ganesh.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I think that Urba has posted in the chat box that he has already indicated that he has provided a link where you can download today's presentation. He also mentioned the ATO YouTube channel, where you can not only see some YouTubes about the ATO, but where you can also see ministerial statements which were made in support of sustainable transport at the last 14th high-level EST forum, which happened in October in Japan, and which Mohanty was referring to. So, so there are all these ways that you can engage with us, and please, whenever you have questions in the future on transport data or transport policies in Asia, that you say, I'm looking for certain information, please write to us at asiantransportoutlook@gmail.com. We do not guarantee that we have the information, but we definitely will make an effort to go through our information. And we do think that by now that we have the most comprehensive overview of the transport sector in Asia. So, and we are more than happy to share. Yeah, with that, then I would like to thank everybody for your attention, and that you allocated time to attend the webinar. And we look forward to reaching out to you and again in the future as well. And thanks to Mohanty for his contribution as well. Yeah. Thank you, and until the next time.
Thank you all.
Yeah, bye-bye.